Hi, I'm Michael Appel for BizNews.com. The war in Ukraine has had a lot of knock-on effects around the world, South Africa certainly included, from a political, energy, and agricultural perspective in particular. The global supply chain is in focus and has been since COVID-19 days at least. Now, in South Africa, a very big part of that supply chain is Transnet, our ports and rail authority. It's developed into a massive headache and a bottleneck through which companies, industry, and farmers need to send their products for export and obviously import. What's worse is workers are on strike at the moment. We cannot compete in a global market with one hand tied behind our backs. And I want to have a broader discussion on all things impacting the agri sector in the country at the moment. My guest knows the situation around the world and locally all too well. He's the former president of the World Farmers Organization and is a part of the Southern African Agri Initiative and an NGO called Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network. He's going to tell us what that all means. Dr. Theo de Jager, thank you for your time.
Hi, Michael. What a privilege to share your platform today.
Let's start on just a general overview on the farming side. What's the market like at the moment and how much has it changed over the last year?
It doesn't matter to which commodity you go today. Farmers feel that agriculture is not in a good space at the moment. There is not really one commodity in which we can say, well, we are now making good profits. It is different to a year or two ago. You know, during the COVID years in 2020 and 2021, agriculture was by far the best performing sector of our economy. And farmers, although their markets were disrupted and although they had to do a lot of quick food work to find alternative markets, farmers did very well under COVID. But then the war in Ukraine struck, as you have alluded to, which actually took our input costs through the roof. Diesel, everybody who has a car will know what happened to the price of petroleum products, but also fertilizers, which is actually just one of the side products of the petroleum industry. Those prices went through the roof. And farmers, those who could and those who had good access to financing, they closed their eyes and they said, let's spend more on the inputs because the prices at the marketing end will also escalate, and that did not really happen. So the farmers are really squeezed between poor market prices and very high input costs.
Dr. de Jager, tell me about this NGO that we mentioned off air a second ago, Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network. You say this is something that has diplomatic status in the country. What is this NGO all about?
The members of this organization, this NGO, are governments in Africa, mostly in southern, eastern, and western Africa. And I think there's at the moment some 23 of them. And it does what the name says. It does policy analysis, and it works very hard to try to align policies in the agriculture, the food, and natural resources space. And the reason for it is simply that, you know, intra-Africa trade on foodstuffs is less than 3% of total trade. In Africa, we have not really started to trade with ourselves when it comes to food and fiber, agricultural products. And the more we try to open our borders, the more we try to make it easy to trade with each other, the harder we need to work to align policies. For example, you cannot have GMOs, genetically modified seeds, in 2 or 3 countries, but the rest it is banned, and then you trade in those products and it flows through across borders. It will not work. So we need policy alignment, and to do policy alignment, we need policy analysis. Why do we have policies the way we have? And it is basically the first step in a much bigger trend to open up our borders and to make it easier for African countries to trade with each other, similar to what happened in Europe before the European Union.
Speaking of making things easier in terms of trade, Transnet definitely not doing South Africa any favors. I see you tweeted the other day that South Africa's table grapes and blueberries exports are under enormous pressure. Is that right?
You know, every farmer is in competition with the best other farmers in the world every day of our lives, because food and fiber flows across borders on a daily basis, and you cannot just put it somewhere in a storeroom and wait until the markets have stabilized. Food, by the very nature of it, has an expiry date, and the need for food is always urgent. We need to trade in it every day. So trade plays a massive role in global food security, and in many countries also in local food security. There are so many countries who simply cannot produce for themselves, who will never be self-sufficient when it comes to food. Most of the Arab-speaking world, many African countries, and we are fortunate in South Africa that since the Second World War, we've never been in a food security crisis. We've been a net exporter ever since the Second World War. And it becomes tougher and tougher, not because of the surpluses we need to produce, not because of the logistics internally. It is because we cannot get our food out of our ports. We have the ports and we have the systems in the ports, but we do not have the people who can manage a modern port anymore. Because of the political dispensation in which we are, in which we no longer appoint people because of their ability to do a job, but because of their political connectiveness. Transnet has gone through the floor, and Portnet has now gone through the floor. And there are certain industries such as table grapes and blueberries where you have a rather short shelf life, where farmers say, we would rather opt out of the industry because we can make no profits if we cannot get our stuff through the ports.
Yeah, that strike entering its second week, no end in sight at the moment for that. And I mean, the knock-on effects on our economy and on the farmers is just horrendous. I want to speak about something else that you've tweeted about recently, which is that there were 7 farm murders in August and 8 in September. And the issue of the "Kill the Farmer, Kill the Boer" song, that hate speech case was in the High Court. AfriForum brought that case. It went against them, and they have been given leave to appeal that. Do you believe that there was an actual spike in farm murders after the ruling in that court case?
Well, it's not whether one believes it or not. The numbers are there. You know, in July, we had only 2 farm murders. We have had an average of 1 farm attack every second day over the last 25 years, and 1 farm murder every 5th day over the last 25 years. So on average, we have between 65 and 70 farm murders per year. In July, we've had those 2. In August, we've had the judgment that "Kill the Farmer, Kill the Boer" is not hate speech. But in August, all of a sudden, we've had 7. And then in September, we had these 8 farm murders. The moment the judge said that it is not hate speech, the EFF started singing right outside court, "Kill a farmer, kill the boer." Now, you know, you cannot say it is not hate speech and sing it at populist meetings and then turn your head away when it's actually happening on the ground. So for us as farmers, the judgment was devastating. We could not believe that the court would rule that. And we got sympathy from all over the world. I had letters from farmers' organizations in more than 50 countries sympathizing with this judgment. And we firmly believe that the judge had made a mistake here. So we will be very grateful if AfriForum would appeal this ruling and see if we can sort out the matter locally. If not, we will have no choice but to take it to international fora. and tried to declare it a crime against humanity at the United Nations.
Another issue that remains contentious in South Africa is expropriation without compensation. The Kgalema Motlanthe, the former deputy president or president caretaker for a while, he put out a high-level report on land reform. Do you believe that that data was inconvenient to politicians? Was that report swept under the rug?
Most certainly it was. You know, that report was already published in March 2018, and it landed on the table of President Ramaphosa, and it is still there. Government has not yet responded to that report, and there's a very good reason for it. The report pointed out very well how it was not the willing seller principle which have hampered land reform. It was an incompetent buyer and a corrupted buyer. Now, the whole notion of expropriation without compensation is built on this narrative that the willing seller had failed us. I've been involved in land reform since 2000, intimately involved in it, and I've lost a farm and land reform myself in the restitution process in Trigastdal. I've seen exactly how this thing works through the validation of the claims, through the valuations of the farms, through the contracting, the transfer. What normally happens in 6 weeks in private sector takes more than 6 years in government. And there is so many officials and agents of the state, the valuers, the lawyers, who and those who must write a feasibility study and a business plan and so, who wants a bribe, who wants a cut of the pie, that it is nearly impossible to make land reform work through the administrative processes which we have in place. And then after that, the beneficiaries are completely delivered. You know, Michael, I do not know white farmers who will be able to make a success in the kind of system in which we expect the beneficiaries of land reform to make a success, because they do not own the land. They never get the title. So they don't have access to financing. They do not have any security to put down at the bank. They are delivered to the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development to be their bank. And it's not a good bank. One of our members in SAI, who applied for a post-settlement grant already in 2015, and it was approved in 2016, only got it 3 weeks ago. Now, what was he supposed to do ever since? He did not even have the money to keep his electricity switched on the farm.
Yeah, that is absolute madness. The entire system is set up to fail, yet no fingers get pointed at, as you say, the one that is administratively supposed to make this happen. Where are we as a country in bringing emerging farmers into the fold? You know, every opportunity politicians get, they will tell us about the differences between the races in this country. But do you get a sense that there is better samewerking? Is there a better relationship actually on the ground between farmers of all races than politicians would have us believe?
Most certainly so. Most certainly so. You know, we live in a country where a large part of our farms burn down every year. Just see what the damage was in the Northern Cape over the last few days. Hundreds of thousands of hectares burn down every year. And when there's a fire, it is everybody's fire, because that fire will come to you too. And I've experienced the cooperation between neighbors, black, white, Indian, brown, when there's something like a fire or disease. Livestock disease management is no longer really governed by the state. If you do not do it through private structures, local private structures, it will simply not be done. And there you can see what the cooperation is. We only have too few black farmers. And we have a lot of beneficiaries of land reform, and we have a lot of land that is in the hands of black farmers, but we have very few black farmers. When AFASA said some 4 years ago that more than 50% of all their members who are beneficiaries of land reform in Gauteng have ran away from the farms, I think it might even be more. Minister Nkwinti, the previous Minister of Land Reform, said that more than 90% of their projects have failed. I still want to see the other 10%. And it is not because black people cannot farm. We have excellent black farmers. The problem is that there's not an environment which is conducive to profitable farming or which is conducive to investment for them because of the system. It is the system which has failed them. And you know, the people whom we work with inside, those who are our members and those who attend our meetings, they can farm. There's nothing you can teach them about maize and cattle. They've been working with it since they can remember. The problem is the business part of it. It is how to make a profit out of it, how to be competitive, both on the local and in the international markets. And that should be rectified by the support one has from the extension services in the department and through training, the training facilities. We had 17 agricultural colleges a mere 16 years ago. Of those, there's only really one which is still internationally recognized, Elsenburg in the Western Cape. The system do not deliver for us competitive black farmers. And those who can really farm, the system does not allow them to become profitable. And so what we need to change is our policies. On that level, we need to put things together. And this is a function of government.
When we spoke the other day, you were out on a farm with the now former Premier of Gauteng, David Makhura. Are you able to say, you know, what that was about? Are you two just friends?
Yeah, we are just good friends. We seldom talk politics. We talk a lot of rugby. We attend a lot of rugby games together. And I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a leader, of course, from the same province as I am, from Limpopo, although he was Premier of Gauteng. And he has a very keen interest in the dynamics of agriculture. He has been helping me a lot to bring the World Farmers Organization's next General Assembly 2023 to South Africa. And we went together to a big game ranch here in Gauteng to see whether the facilities is enough and well enough equipped to host such an event.
I see. Well, it's good to know that there are people, who at least were within the fold that have an appreciation for agriculture and the incredibly important and vital role that it plays in South Africa's economy. Dr. Theo de Jager, what a pleasure to speak to you again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for allowing me on your platform, Michael.